Let's get started. Well, welcome everybody to Java with Jim. Another lovely Thursday morning. Today, we're going to dig in on the topic of business operating systems. And I'm going to deal with three primary ones that people have focused on in the small middle market where most of our clients are. And I'm going to talk a little bit also about strategy deployment software, which is also a relevant topic, but it's got its own little twist on it. So I'll end on that topic. So the three I'm going to deal with today are Traction by Gino Wickman. He wrote that book and got a bunch around it. Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, which is really the second evolution of Rockefeller Habits, which is probably 15, 20-year-old book. And then 4DX by a variety of authors. So all three of them are pretty popular in the sort of fast growth community. By the way, I looked at a bunch of others as well, lean startup, predictable growth. And while they had interesting ideas, they didn't have like a framework you could immediately plug into and use. And these three did as systems. So that's why I'm focused on these three, not to say others don't have value. They do. So let's start with Traction, which is one of the more popular ones among our group. So this is really supposedly designed for people with companies between 10 and 250 members. Michael's got Traction. You got your book? Yeah, Traction. So super popular, also called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And they have 6 items that are sort of central to the system: vision, data, process, issues, people, and traction. And I'm going to go through each one of those and what do they mean. And they've got some tools wrapped around each of those ideas that's important. But the big idea here is if you can be really clear about where you're going and get everybody lined up against that goal and you measure it, you're going to get better results, meaning traction, than you would if you didn't do that. And all of us know that. We've been in companies that didn't have a particularly strong vision or operating system. And, people were doing all kinds of random stuff that they thought might help, but who knew if it did or didn't? Probably didn't in many cases. So you have wasted talent doing things that are not productive towards the ultimate goal of the business. So first thing to start with is a vision. Now, I have to say, I don't fully agree with everything he did here, but they want to develop an aligned vision of where we're bringing the business. 10 years out, 3 years out, 1 year out. And I have a rule that anything past 1 year is strategy. Anything under 1 year is tactics. So I would say they have a tactical plan with the 1 year plan, a strategic plan at 3 years, and 10 years. I got to say, I've never done a 10-year goal. I guess you could call it a goal, no more than that. I wouldn't put a ton of meat on it. But, because what's going to happen, think about where you were 10 years ago. And would you have predicted to be where you are today? And the answer is highly unlikely, right? And so your ability to project 10 years into the future, I think, is extremely low. And therefore, I find that little less value. But if you want kind of a North Star of where we're going organizationally, it can have some value. So 10 year, where are we going? The big plan, the BHAG, if you will. The 3 year plan, which is sort of the more intermediate, measurable, where we're going to get to. And then the 1 year plan, which is the things we have to do to get to the 3 year plan, right? So that becomes more tactical. They're big on data, I think, and of course we are too. You need a scorecard, you need the measurable, observable. And so if we're going to have certain objectives that we have, they call them, and I'll talk about this in a minute, you need to know when you got done. Did you achieve the objective that you had? And therefore it has to be measurable. I'll jump to traction. So they talk about traction, about building traction, meaning momentum and so forth in the business. And they use a concept called rocks. Funny enough, this is also in Vern Harnish's book, and he accuses kind of everybody else from stealing from him, which may actually be at least partially true. So rocks are 90-day objectives. So fairly short term. And the idea is we're going to do a series of sprints to get to our 1 year and our 3 year objectives. The example they use is a couple of mountain climbers that climbed El Capitan in Yosemite. And they climbed it up this face that nobody had ever climbed before. And they said, well, how do you do it? It's 2,000 feet vertical, blah, blah, blah. They go, well, the rope length is it's 4,000 feet, 200 feet long. So we solved the climb in 200 feet chunks, right? What they call a pitch. And it's 20 pitches from the bottom to the top. So I think of rocks as the same thing. It's the 200 feet length of rope. I don't need to solve the whole damn climb. I just need to solve the 200-foot piece of rope. And what are the tricky little bits in there? And that's a rock. And the way you describe a rock is from X to Y. Because if you don't have definition on what the conclusion looks like, you'll be doing it forever. So you could say the rock is improved customer service. And I go, not a useful rock, right? It could be improve our customer score from 54 to 60 over the next 90 days. Okay, that's observable, and I know I hit the finish line. Now, you may do another one, improve from 60 to 65 in the next 90 days, but they have to be observable and knowable. They're big on process. Remember, I talked about alignment is a big part of this particular one. Traction is a lot about documenting your critical processes. So if you have processes that are critical to delivering value, you want to document them and then drive people to follow them. It's not always possible, but they say, look, if people are doing it kind of their way, it's not necessarily the most effective or efficient way. It doesn't mean processes can't be improved and changed, but you need to at least document them to get yourself started to say, here's how we're going to do things. And then over time, you modify as long as everybody agrees to change to the new way. They talk a lot about right people, right seat, which I'll talk about more in depth in a minute. And then issues. And they've got sort of a system on issue elevation and solving. When you come together in the management meeting, they call it an L10 meeting, meaning on a scale of 1 to 10, we want that to be a 10-point meeting, a super good meeting. And most meetings that we all go to probably wouldn't be a 10 out of 10. There we're going to identify the issue. We're going to discuss the issue, and then we're going to solve the issue in the L10 meeting, in the executive team meeting. We're not going to defer and maybe we solve it later. So you go there and you solve real issues as a team. And that's part of why it's a positive meeting. So they have a whole structure for what that meeting should look like as well, which I think is reasonably good. There are others that are also good. Going over to sort of process, they also talk about accountability charts. Which is really an org chart, but with the functions deployed into the organization. Who owns what is what you're really trying to define. So who owns billing? Is it sales? Is it inside sales? Is it accounting? Who owns collections? Is it accounting? Is it inside sales? I mean, so you may go, well, that's obvious, Jim. I go, maybe to you, or maybe inside your little head, it's obvious, but it's not obvious to everybody in the organization unless you display it and you share it. And that's really what that's designed is take what's maybe in your head, put it out there and share it organizationally. And then be ready for people to say, it doesn't make sense that I do that process. It should be owned by Lynn. She's got the tools and the people. She's better positioned. She should do it, not me. Awesome. Great conversation, right? I talked about rocks. By the way, on rocks, everybody has 1 to 3 rocks. No more than 3 maximum. Really should be 2. It's 90 days. It's quick. If there's a third one, pick the least important one and do it the next 90 days. So limited number of objectives, big, hairy ones in the short term called rocks. So we're moving rocks out of the way and clearing the path. I thought the people analyzer here was particularly good because it started with values. In other words, you start with your core values organizationally and you go, how does this person match up to our core values? Plus, positive, 0, negative, let's say. You can do it on a 5-point scale, 10-point scale, doesn't matter. But just rate them on your values. Do they represent your values? Meaning, do they buy into the program? And we talked before about buy-in and making the numbers. And then they have what they call get it, GWC. They get it. They understand the job in the company. They want to do this job. I've got them in a job they actually want to do. And they have the capacity and capability to do the job, GWC. So they're not into other things. It's really, do they support the values and GWC? If somebody sort of is positive on all of those factors, they're in the right job. That's how simple the system is. So I actually liked it. I liked particularly We've done the value matchup before. That can be a little bit arbitrary. You got to be careful there. But the GWC I thought was particularly useful. Do they get it? Do they want to do this job? And do they have the capability to do it? Right. So we've all seen people that want to do a job, but they're not capable to do the job. I had a situation recently where we had a guy who was like a CMO. He wanted to be CEO, and he is not ready for that job. Right. So he wants to do the job, but he's not capable to do the job. Not yet. He's got some stuff he's got to learn before he's really ready to do that job. So that'd be a pretty typical one. So that's traction. Simple, structured, not overly structured. You'll see as we get into some of the other ones, they're even more structured, particularly scaling up. Maybe it's because of its maturity level, but it's used by a lot of people and with pretty good success. If you don't have a system of how we get things done here, how we keep people accountable, it's not a bad move. Traction would be one I definitely would put on my list to take a look at. So any questions or anybody use Traction that have feedback around it, a positive, negative? Paul, go ahead.
We're EOS Pure, been using Traction, 4DX, and Culture by Design. Traction for 7 years. So I get it, I want it, and I have the capacity.
Got it. Now, do you use 4DX as well or just Traction?
So what we discovered and when we implemented Traction 7 years ago was it has weak scoreboards and scorecards and report cards. So we used 4 disciplines of execution for how we score, our company, our team, an individual, and then we bring that down to a client and customer relationship. So we use that for that purpose. And then we use Culture by Design for our fundamentals on how we're performing against, everything that's, not a number.
Got it. Awesome. I'll talk about 4DX in a little bit. I think you're right about scoreboarding and the graphic nature of some of the things they do there. Anybody else use Traction?
I used to use scaling. I used to use portions of scaling up. I just didn't think, and I know Vern pretty well. He's a great guy. I think he was kind of late to the game. I mean, there's, when you're building out a new business model, scaling up, I think is great for using the one-page, business plan to design. But in Traction, they use the VTO, which is a portion of that.
Yep.
Yep.
But if you go back to Rockefeller Habits, a lot of the elements were there. Scaling up just expanded on it. So, and we had some people that were using Rockefeller Habits reasonably successfully too. With trimesters and themes and the whole deal. So, anybody else have experience with Traction?
Jim, this is Dave Beckman.
Hey, Dave.
We use Traction. We adopted it about 1.5 years ago. Ironically, we do strategic planning as a firm. So we find that their models, the simplicity of what they do mirrors well with what we do. And what we've learned is it's an evolution. For anyone that's considering adopting it, you'll get better quarter by quarter at the discipline around it. And it is very, very simple. We started adjusting the 3-year target where it's a rolling 3 years as opposed to marching towards the 3-year, which is a little bit different than what we recommend our clients to do, but that's helped us stay. And we also agree the 10-year, we really just view that as a strategic vision and kind of directionally what we're marching towards, but nothing more.
Right. We changed it to a 5-year BHAG versus a 10-year.
You went to 5?
Yeah.
5 I could just about live with. I think that's still long, but
5 and then 3-year picture, right? You have to be able to back into your 3-year picture. If you can't back into your 3-year picture, it's really not a picture. It's a mirage.
Got it. Cool. So, all right. I think the simplicity comment of Dave's is this is a pretty simple system. But if you got nothing, something's better than nothing, and it can work, and it has worked for a lot of people. So let's move over to scaling up. We mentioned that before. This is by Vern Harnish. I've actually not met Vern, but we sort of run in the same circles. We just never bumped into each other, unfortunately. I think he's back from Barcelona now too. Anyway, he wrote initially The Rockefeller Habits, pretty successful book. You may have heard of an organization called Gazelles that's based on it. He just recently came out with Scaling Up, maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And this is the sort of the 2.0 version of Rockefeller Habits. To Paul's comment, he starts with the one-page strategic plan. So everything on one page. It actually ends up being a couple of pages, but really simple, graphic, understandable, everything in the same format. Where are we going? What are the measures? How do we know we got there? What are our differentiators? So it's pretty rigorous methodology to come up with where we going and where we bring in the business. So one page strategic plan that doesn't change very often. And then he gets into, there's really 4 decisions that we make as leaders that we need to focus on: people, strategy, execution, and cash. And so on people, they really talk about, do they live the core values? Are they the right people on the bus? He steals a lot from Collins here about having the right people on the bus. By the way, the one-page strategic plan he stole from somebody else. That isn't his either. It was from somewhere else. So in case you think there's any new thinking in management consulting, there probably isn't. So, and then on the people, let's just dig there because I'll dig into each one sequentially. They have a personal plan. Everybody has a personal plan of what they're supposed to get done. And they have process and function accountability. So very similar to Traction that talks about who owns what function, who owns what process, and being clear about that. They do the same thing in Rockefeller Habits or in Traction of having an accountability for both process and function. And that's really more about clarity than anything else. It's like just who owns what, who is responsible for what. It's just having that conversation. And for anybody who's been through this, they know just gaining clarity gets you an immediate bump in performance. Oh yeah, I own that. Okay, I own that. Not Pam, but I own that one. So that is, I think, powerful, simple, but powerful as one element. Strategy, they're very big on what matters to clients. So people spend a lot of time on strategy and they come up with strategies that are cute, but clients don't care. Right? So they go, and that's a question we ask all the time when working with people. They go, here's my strategy. It's to be the bestest of the bestest. And I go, great. How much more will customers pay for that? And they go, well, they don't really care about that. And I go, then it's not a strategy. So if you can't say, if I was really good at this thing, my point of differentiation or points of differentiation, and I can either charge a little more money for it or just win clients like crazy with it, then it's not a strategy. So he's very big on leadership owns that customer facing piece. You want to get very customer facing as a leader to understand what they really want so that you can help build that strategy. Don't count on the salespeople. Don't count on the marketing knuckleheads. Don't part on you need to be talking to customers so that you understand this. And I think I've seen a lot of CEOs that get in their office, they get isolated. They're not talking to customers. They think they know, but they don't know. It's all hearsay, data from 5 years ago. It's not real. So I think that is a really good point of get in front of customers. So he steals BHAG. That's also from Collins. Talks about the market value proposition, which is what we just talked about. What is the thing that you do that the market actually values? And what is your differentiator? He talks about a 10x advantage here too, which I think I like it. It's not always possible, but if you have on one element a 10x advantage over somebody else, you can win everywhere, whether it's ease of doing business, or I'll give you an example. I was just talking to somebody who does air balancing. Olaf's one of our members, and Olaf goes into a building. He measures the air for the AC and the ventilation hoods and all that jazz to make sure they're properly organized and it's energy savings and it's still comfortable. And it's critical. You need it for your certificate of occupancy. Got to have it. But always he gets called in. They're already 2 months behind schedule. We need you in here to get this done before we get our certificate of occupation. You got to get it done and we need to report quick, right? And these things are complex, so not that easy. So he just decided he's going to make a 24-hour guarantee. 24 hours after we leave the site, you'll have the report in your hand or it's free. And he went And I think it's genius because it's very hard to do. He's got some combination of automation and talent he's going to use to accomplish that, but it's exactly what the customers care about. Every day that that building isn't rented or leased or sold is money out of their pocket. So by doing that, he is going right to their pocketbook. And most firms are taking 5, 7, 10 days to get this. And he's talking about 1. So he really is 10x better than anybody else. And I guarantee he's going to win a ton of business on that. We call it a mafia offer, but on that offer, because it's so good, you'd be dumb to say no, right? So what's that 10x advantage in your strategy? On execution, big on priorities. Management sets priorities. Again, limited number of priorities here. You don't want to have too many priorities. Generally, we say 3 maximum as priorities, supported by data, right? So this is measurement, KPIs, and he talks about rocks, right? What are the big rocks that have to be moved? This is why he claims Traction stole it from him, because he has the term rocks and they're using the same term rocks. So it's the same language ultimately, but those are the things that are in the way of getting us where we need to get, things we have to move. And then he talks about a meeting cadence, weekly meetings, structured agenda, just like Traction, little different structure, but not tremendously different, with a goal towards making decisions and moving on. So constantly focus on the rocks and on the things that are in the way, meeting weekly, clearing those rocks and moving on. And then the last one is on cash. And, I think I may have told this story before. I had a friend who was starting a business and in the wealth management space. And he goes, Jim, what advice would you give to me going into business on my own? He'd never been in business on his own. I go, well, Barry, rule number 1, don't run out of money. Because if you run out of money, you're out of business. He goes, all right, got it. Don't run out of money. I'm like, all right. Rule number 2, don't run out of money. And funny enough, rule number 3 is don't run out of money. It's the only thing that matters. So they talk about cash here, but they're not, and they say, no, obviously rule number 1, don't run out of money, but then they start talking about cash velocity, which I'm a big fan of that. People don't think about how fast is the cash turning through my business, which is really a surrogate for return on assets, right? So if I have $100 million in play and I make $5 million, it's $5 million, 5% return on assets. But let's say I could quadruple the speed of cash velocity, shrink inventory, expand AP, shrink AR. So now I have $25 million in the business. I'm still making $5 million. Didn't change that. I now have a 20% return on assets. Far more compelling investment for you as the investor or your external investors or whoever. So money velocity is super relevant to returns. And he talks about a bunch of ways to get that done. I would say that part's a little thin. It's pretty same-o in terms of the things he's recommending, but sort of has it all in one place. So scaling up is also where it's used by thousands of people. They've got people that can help you deploy it. Not a bad system. It's kind of the granddaddy because it goes back to Rockefeller Habits, which was one of the earlier ones. I think to Paul's comment, scaling up is recent. And, it's funny when you read the book, Vern's accusing everybody of stealing his stuff when he stole half his stuff from other people and like, dude, get over it, right? Like everybody, just give credit. You can steal from anybody you want, just give credit. So anybody have experience or thoughts on scaling up on the Harnish's system or Rockefeller Habits? Nobody's used it.
The one chapter about cash velocity, I thought was instructive to talk, because from a small business perspective, very few people understand how critical cash timing is to what we're doing in the business. And showing that graphically, okay, when we purchase something, we have to pay it. We finish the job, we don't get paid 30 days. That timing of when the cash occurs, when we pay something, is really instructive for the team. And I thought that chapter was really helpful, at least to give clarity or a little bit of understanding of what they could do to help reduce that cash flow or increase the cash velocity.
Nice. I actually, it was one of my key metrics in most of my companies, cash cycle time. What's our order to cash received from client, that full cycle time? And we tried to shrink that as best we could. But again, I think just creating visibility. But I think you're right. Probably the chart, nobody really has that in their head if they haven't thought about it. And I agree. It is helpful. Quick story, just some companies really, really think about this. So let's give Walmart. I'll pick on Walmart. Actually, I'll pick on McDonald's. So McDonald's has really thought about this. So they buy their burgers and they pay in 30 days. So they buy the burgers, shows up at the store. 30 days later, they're going to pay the provider. Now, they have about 4 or 5 days of inventory in a McDonald's in the freezer, maybe a little less. So that burger is cooked within, let's say, maximum 5 days, and paid for before it's eaten and then eaten by a client, right? So their inventory arrival to cash in, because they get paid by credit card or cash, is 5 days. And then they got 25 days that they're holding that cash before they have to pay anybody. It's a negative cash cycle. So your suppliers are financing your operation. Procter & Gamble has and Walmart have the same deal on diapers. Procter & Gamble said, look, we'll resupply your diapers and we'll charge you. You have to pay us 15 days later. Well, diapers fly off the shelves at Walmart in about 2 days. So diapers show up, they leave in 2 days, they get paid for with cash or credit card, and they got 13 more days where they have to pay for their diapers. Negative cash cycle. And most people, that's the thing of beauty, if you can ever generate it. Most people have what you talked about, Michael. I order the product, I have it in inventory, I convert it into something, I send it to the customer, they accept it, I get paid. It's 180 days of cash, right? Anybody else deal with scaling up or Rockefeller habits? A comment or thought on it?
So I went through they had a school for 3 years called Birthing of Giants.
Oh yeah.
I'm a graduate of that, and it's actually taught the entire way through. We were they experimented on us over that 3-year period of time. Highly recommend it. I mean, all this stuff is the same in the end, right? It's just whether you like traction or scaling up or what have you. I mean, we pull from whatever makes the most sense.
Right.
But what I would say is, if you have a business that needs to pivot, using the one-page business model is extremely important. We use it all the time. Like, for example, when we have a new business that we're looking at, we use it. And then, if we have an existing business that we see a massive shift or something changing, we go back to that plan and say, okay, that was a threat that we didn't see, or did we see that threat and not pay attention to it?
Right. And
So
I
it's
can't
all
remember which
one-page
one talks about
strategic
the
plan.
strategies based on assumptions. And so if the assumptions prove to be wrong or something changed, like you talked about, it's time to
Well,
pivot the
we
strategy.
review it every year. So we have quarterly business reviews with our company, but we have an annual review, and we'll look at that. We'll really investigate that.
Good. And when did you go to Birthing of Giants? Because it's changed recently. The old one or the
Yeah,
new
it
one?
used to be hard to get into. In fact, it was an honor to be one of the 60 chosen. So there was thousands of applicants and only 60 a year. So the original class took place with, I mean, if you look at the original 10 years, some of the most famous business people, and I don't want to start naming names, like the first ever class, almost, I mean, 95% of that class are either billionaires or extremely famous business people.
Right. Because it's being offered now, and I don't think it is what it was. It's a poor copy.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, I mean, yeah, it sucks. I mean, it's not the same in the sense where, like, I was rejected 4 times, and they say, all of you were rejected once. Some of you were rejected 3 times. One of you was rejected 4 times. I stand up in the class at MIT, right? Because I'm like, hey guys, I'm going to need the most help here. And then they say, by the way, the two people that you're sitting next to are your partners for the next 3 years. They look at me and they're like, shit, I got to help this guy out.
I sat in the wrong seat.
And and you make great, great I mean, I have such great relationships that have come out of that, and learned a ton and had great guest professors, brilliant guest professors. So I don't know if it's, I know it was one class a year. Now I think there's like 10, so they've really expanded it, which is not a bad thing, as long as they're getting the same curriculum and the same level of people, that
I
really
don't
desire to be there.
So anyway, let's move on to 40X. So 40X, 4 disciplines of execution, a birthing of giants, Bruce, but birthing of giants. It's at MIT. It's not what it used to be. So be very careful about getting involved in it. I know the people running it, and I know, what Vern's about. A whole different level of talent around it and so forth. So just be careful before you jump on that one.
I'm happy to talk to you. So,
there you go.
Whoever it is.
So 40X is 4 disciplines of execution. There are 4 ideas. Focus on the wildly important goal, WIG, wildly important goal. You may have heard that before. Act on the lead measures, not the lagging measures, the leading measures. Have a compelling scorecard. That's what Paul said they picked up, and he's right. They do a pretty good job talking about this. And then a cadence of accountability. And by the way, on the prior ones, I focused on kind of the weekly tactical meeting. There are also quarterly strategic in both of those models. So you've got you've read Death by Meetings. There's a short, local, quick meeting on short, local, quick stuff. There's a quarterly meeting on kind of longer cycle items. And there's an annual meeting on long cycle items, right? So you're trying to deal in the right time scale with the right meeting at the right cadence. That's true in 40X too. So the first one, D1, focus on the WIG. Again, only a couple, 3 maximum. We had a client that used to say, and he was right, focus equals growth. And you define what you do by what you don't do. So you define who you are by what you don't do, not by what you do, because there's always going to be more opportunities than there are people to get them done. Always. Particularly if you're entrepreneurial, you're like, I could do this, or I could do that, or I could do this, or I could do that, I could do that. And wow, we could do this. And you're like, and you ran out of people 4 ideas ago, right? Just classic. And so you really have to be disciplined about going, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be incredibly good at it. It's my strongest value prop. My best thing I can do for clients, and the way I can win the most business the most quickly. I got some people we're working with, and we're trying to do that with them, where they've got multiple lines of business that they kind of backed into. And the problem is now they've got revenue and some profit, and they cover some overhead, and they're like, I don't want to stop doing it, but they stink at it, relatively speaking to maybe their core line that they're amazingly great at. And the very gutsy move is stop doing one and do a heck of a lot more of the other, even if that's over time. But that's a very, very, nervous thing to do. So I get it, but focus. No more than 2 wigs per person. Everybody, there's a name on every wig, or more than one name. And again, it has to have the finish line. The wig is from X to Y, same as traction and the others. If you're not measuring, if you're not clear on the finish line, you'll be farting around with that wig forever. So you got to be super clear, third party observable. And they've got, they had this idea, was it here or here? I'm not going to get it. I'll get it. Anyway, so that's the big thing. The big thing here also on achieving new things, there's a quote they got, which I actually liked, which is, to achieve a new goal, you need to do new behaviors. To achieve a new goal, you need to do new behaviors. So you can't be doing the stuff you've been doing and get a different outcome. You got to change it, right? And even if you go, well, we're going in this other direction, then they've really got to think about what things need to be done differently to make that happen. Because we can't just say, well, we'll just plug it into the current network. It won't work. The big thing here, and what we're trying to do, is avoid what they call the whirlwind. So every day we show up and there's this whirlwind of stuff that shows up on our desk that we got to do and is important and critical and And I found, when the last company I ran, I mean, I would get my best work done from like 6 in the morning to 8 in the morning, and then like 6 at night to 7 at night when the whirlwind wasn't going, right? Because it was almost impossible to resist during working hours because people are, you had inbounds from every direction. So the idea of wigs is to say, I'm going to try to close my ears on the whirlwind and focus on the things that are going to really move the game here. On measures, they talk about lead, not lag. So lead measures, and this is something we spend a lot of time with people on when we're doing KPIs, is forward-looking predictive measures. In other words, that predicts the outcome. I don't want to just measure the outcome. So like all your financial measures are lagging measures. They're not actually useful to run a company. They're not useful operationally. They tell you what happened last month, not what I need to do this month to make the outcome happen, right? So, for example, they gave one example in the book about reduce stockouts, right? So there's a retail environment, reduce stockouts from 10% to 2%. And they go, that's the measure. And they go, actually, you know what the measure is did we do the shelf review every 2 hours? So they started measuring, did we do the shelf review and restock every 2 hours? And guess what? The stock out went away, right? So the stock out was the lagging measure. It's like, oh, dang, something bad happened, as opposed to the behavior that we want to measure that will drive the outcome we're after. That's the difference between lead and lag, right? And you can influence it, right? You don't want a lead indicator that you can't influence. So we had one guy we worked with a while ago. He did high power electrical repair. So like the big high power lines that you see. And, the business was okay, but he really made money when hurricanes and ice storms happened, right? All the power lines in Florida are down. They call all the trucks and electrical people from all over the country to fix it. They're on double, triple overtime. Texas has the same thing when there's an ice storm. So a leading indicator would be there's a hurricane predicted for Florida, and there isn't a damn thing he can do about it. It's not influenceable, if that's a word. He can't influence it, right? So even though it did predict performance, he couldn't influence it. So it wasn't particularly useful to him. So it's got to be something you can actually control and influence. D3 is on scorecarding, and they're big on, I can look at it and I know what's going on in 5 seconds. So a 5-second rule, not the bread fell on the ground and you got 5 seconds to pick it up and eat it. Not a different 5-second rule than that one. And that means it's got to be graphic and it's got to be simple. 5-second rule. I can look at it and go, hey, that line is going the wrong way. And you go, yes, it is. Or, why is that red now? It used to be green. You go, great question, right? Now we're having a real conversation about what's going on. So simple, graphic, 5 seconds at the company level, the team level, the individual level that was talked about before. And then finally, D4, cadence of accountability. They've got the weekly, what they call WIG, widely important goal session. That's the management team meeting. And they have other sort of longer cycle meetings to build the strategy, evaluate the strategy, and so forth that are in there as well. And in the WIG meeting, it's what commitments have we made and delivered on as a team to each other? How are we doing on our scorecard? We look at metrics. And what's in our way? What do we need to do to clear the path to achieve what we need to achieve? That's the meeting. Bing, bang, boom. Done. We're out of here. Same time every week. Same amount of minutes every week. Done. So that's 4DX. Again, I think this one's pretty simple. I think it's elegantly simple. It doesn't really help you develop a strategy. I think Vern's scaling up is a little better on what's important in a strategy. This is really all about execution, and 4DX. I mean, you get what you expect you would get there. It's completely execution focused. And I had one other thing I wanted to pull out that was cute. No, I don't have it. Has anybody deployed 4DX? We got a couple companies doing 4DX and having pretty good luck with it. Anybody doing 4DX? No. Again, I would say it rates right with traction. And of these, I would say scaling up has gotten a little overloaded with a lot of documents you have to fill out to drive the system. It felt a little paperworky to me, like this paperwork and that paperwork and this and that and da, 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 da. And I'm like, man, I just want simple, right? I just want, and I think 4DX and Traction are better in terms of just simple focus on execution, period. Pam, you had a comment?
That one-page strategic plan of scaling up, I've seen that in such fine print that no one would want to read it. And then it has all this documentation. So really, the simplicity, the whole simplistic idea has been botched by, overcomplicated.
And I think it's 20 years of existing. They've loaded stuff on, loaded stuff. Oh, that's a good idea. That's a good, and it's gotten weighed down with all those good ideas, right? And I've seen the same thing. It's like you can bring one page of notes into the final exam, right? And you go, how small can I write? And bring a microscope to measure my reading. It's basically and so that doesn't meet the 5-second easily visible. It's designed to be simple and graphic, and it's not when you go to mouse type, right? So I'm just going to spend a few minutes on strategy deployment software, because that's kind of another way to go here. All of these.
I got a quick question for you before you
comment?
get that. Question. What is the Traction or EOS equivalent of scaling up's one-page strategy that Pam had just mentioned? Do they have they do have an equivalent, don't they?
It's a VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Exactly. So Vision has one, but I don't think 4DX has one, does it?
No.
No. Yeah. So one-page strategy exists in Traction.
Jim, Pat Lenciani has a good one as well. The playbook. They really focus on this one page, very simple, 5 key questions you answer.
Right.
Okay. Gotcha.
And let me just back up. It doesn't matter which one you pick. Doesn't freaking matter. Just pick one and use it consistently, and you'll get better results than not having one. So, I gave you the details behind them, and maybe one resonated better with you than the other. And that's why I like simple, because I think the probability of success of simple is higher than the probability of success of complex. So, but pick the one you like, that you can live with, that your team can live with, and just do that. And then I think, to the comment we heard before, as you gain maturity in the system, you go, well, we're going to tweak this and tweak that, and we like this a little better, and we're not going to do that. And fine, just do something. It's like I was talking to a trainer at one of the gyms, and he goes, well, basically, coming to the gym and doing anything is better than not coming to the gym. So 1's better than a 0, and it's the same thing here. 1's better than a 0. So. Just moving over to strategy deployment software, and this is an area that is crowded, and so I have a difficult time making a recommendation. But basically, the idea is you load your strategy in, and it cascades into who owns what to drive that strategy, whether it's Rocks or Wigs or BHAGs or whatever it is, and I can track down that Pam owns this piece of that goal, and she reports in, let's say, weekly on how am I doing. Depending on the system, it asks for different kinds of updates. Am I on time? How do I feel about the quality? Whatever it happens to be. And that rolls up into a master sort of scoreboard at the departmental level and the organizational level of how are we doing, red, yellow, green. And you can double click down into what's driving that red if you want to. And you may want to choose to jump in and problem solve, or ping the owner of that area and say, hey, bub, what's going on, right? I see you're red. That's kind of a problem for everybody because we're not going to achieve our goal. Do you need help? Is there a roadblock that's in your way that I can get on? Do you need resource? What's the problem, right? So all of them kind of do that, and they've all got their own little flavor. Funny enough, I would have expected some of the big books to have a direct correlation. Like there's the Traction software, there is the EOS, and it really doesn't exist. So there's a product offering for those guys if they want it. So some of the big names that are out there, Cascade, Rhythm, Achieve It, Empower, Shimbumi, ClearPoint, I could keep going. There's 30 of them. And so all I'm going to say is there are a ton of options. And once again, simple is better than complex. pick the one that works for you, that you think that you can deploy most readily, and stick to it, right? And again, one's better than a zero. Some people don't like these because it feels like micromanagement. And, so the boss is breathing over my neck electronically every week, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? And like, I don't really like that. I can tell you, I would not have loved that I'm always feeding the system so my boss can give me crap. I don't really want to do that. So I think you have to use them judiciously, and use it the way I described. Like when something goes red, how can we help you get that not red, right? What is in the way? What's missing? What support do you need? Is there help? Is there somebody I need to talk to? Is there, as opposed to this, right? You do this, people are going to stop. They'll start cheating. They won't give you real data. And that's just not useful. So real data, no accusations, no shame, no blame, genuine problem solving. It can work on that basis, but we've had a couple companies that have deployed these systems with mixed results. So this is not a guarantee. I like better one of the other ones where we change the language of management and we're all talking about the same things the same way, right? So when we talk about our rocks, we all know what we're talking about. When we talk about our L10 meeting, we know, everybody knows what we're talking about, what's going to happen. It's grooved, right? It's like a sports team where everybody knows the play. It makes a difference. So that is a quick run through sort of turning strategy into tactics. I really didn't talk about strategy development very much. We could maybe do that on a future call. This is really, I kind of got my strategy. Vern's did a little bit, but the rest really I've got a strategy now. I'm executing the heck out of it. And I'll just say, I think there's a ton of value here because I'd rather have a B-class strategy, an A-class execution over an A-class strategy and B-class execution every day of the week. So this is all about A-class execution, right? Repurpose base camp. Okay. Okay, cool. So you've had to do that yourself, Dave, right? You can type it in if you can't talk, but so he's using Basecamp, which is another tracking system, and they morphed it over into Traction, but that's all self-program. And I got to say, all of these software programs, I said, that's what he did. They're all pretty simple. You could really roll your own if you want to. They're not that complex. So if you wanted to say, we're just doing our own, you could probably get that done with a little bit of IT support and, a smart kid probably. So any questions or comments about that? That was kind of a quick blow. Asana. Yep. That's another one on the list. Yeah. Like I said, I Workboard, ClearPoint, all stacks. Yeah. Chorus. Yeah. That's what I mean. There's 30, right? And nobody seemingly has a giant portion of the market. They're all like little chunks of the market all divided up. Probably an opportunity for somebody to roll it up, but they're all different. So I'm not sure how you do that, but any other comments, questions?
You have a question or kind of a comment, kind of question. ISO 9001 standard kind of has some overlap with these strategies. Because we didn't really talk about that, but the quality management programs almost have to be incorporated in a lot of these programs. I don't know, some thoughts.
Yeah, I've done ISO and QS a couple places. I think they're the same. I think they support each other, right? The idea that I'm going to document my methodology and expect people to follow it. And when something doesn't go the way we want to, we elevate the issue. Was it people? Was it process? What needs to change? We make the change and we redeploy. That's a quality system. So I think they can coexist perfectly, wonderfully, frankly. And in fact, where I got to on quality systems, I said, all right, I went into a company that did not have documented processes. I said, all right, we're going to document our processes. And we start doing that. And I go, you know what? Since we're doing all this dang work, we might as well go get ISO 9000 because we're doing all the work to get ISO. And we did it because we wanted to improve our quality and document what we did. getting the little gold star of ISO was like, you know, icing on the cake. We were not after ISO, we were after quality, and ISO came out of drive for quality. So I think they coexist just fine. I mean, you could have an auditor that gives you a little crap, but I think spiritually and you're on point. I don't think it coexists quite as well with, well, Baldrige doesn't exist anymore, but I won't go down there. It wouldn't exist as well, quite as well with Baldrige, but with ISO, no problem. Because
Yeah,
ISO
Jim,
is like, I do what I said I was going to do, and when I don't, I figure out what went wrong and I fix it. That's ISO. So, Lynn.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think you made a really good point about picking one tool or a couple that you're working in conjunction with and sticking to it, because it starts to feel like a patchwork quilt. And then, you know, yes, one will do better than the other, but stick to that same tool and move forward. And I've seen often people want to bring something that might be slightly better in, and it starts to complicate everything.
Yeah. You know, I'd be in the, if it isn't twice as good, don't waste my time. 10% ain't worth the change. Double's worth the change. All right, guys, anything else? Cool. Well, thanks for joining us. Next week we have, to quote Batman, we have a special guest villain. It's someone Lynn is bringing to us. Maybe Lynn could talk for just 1 second about what she's gonna.
Sure. We're going to hear from the author. I'm just going to make sure I'm showing you the author of this book here.
Sorry.
He spent his career building companies that went from small to mid-size. And so it's 50 lessons. He's not going to cover all 50. I'm going to interview him on some of the really key lessons, but he's got he came from the IT industry. He's got some really interesting ways to, you know, a lot of what we've been talking about today, but one of the areas I'm going to focus on is how to expand using low capital as well. I think he's got some really great ideas, and that's what we're going to talk about next week.
Cool. Awesome. I'm imagining out of 50 ideas, there's got to be a bunch of good ones in there. They can't all be good, but some are definitely good. So definitely come get a couple of good ideas, and we'll see you next week on Java. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Hopefully you got something from today.
Yeah, it's great, Jim. Thank you so much.
No problem. Yeah, cheers.